No, I am excited about growth and specifically US growth. So the work we do around the intention gap in particular is very suited to all demographics, but it's suited to the US market. We operated there for the last 5 or 6 years. We've had some real success over there, and I think the timing is right to go deeper. Now, being quite transparent, actually, the landscape for us shifted after working there the last 5 or 6 years. Things definitely moved last year, and we kind of need to let's take a step back and kind of ask ourselves like,
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets Podcast. I'm Pedro, and I'm joined by Sope Agbelusi, who closes the intention gap for C-suite executives and senior leaders. That space between who you intend to be as a leader and who you default to when identity and pressure activate. He works with leaders at organizations like Google, Nike, KPMG, HSBC, and Spotify across technology, financial services, pharmaceuticals, fashion, and e-commerce sectors. Through executive coaching and leadership transformation programs, Sope uses the 3U framework: unlearn, unlock, unleash. He helps leaders unlearn patterns no longer serving them, unlock clarity that holds under pressure, and unleash leadership that is deliberate, intentional, and trusted. Welcome to the show, Sope.
thank you very much for having me, Pedro. It is fascinating listening to someone replay your intro to you.
You're the only one to blame here about that, okay? I'll put it like that. I mean, I'm blaming Sope for the intro. I did it, my due diligence, but you're the one to blame. And you know, Sope, it's great to have you. And I love to rewind a bit, because every coach has that moment where they look at their life and say, yeah, I guess this is what I'm doing now, right? So when was that for you?
For me, it came probably it was about 10, 11 years ago now. Came up in corporate. I've been a leader working in very different spaces, leading teams across finance and tech, commercial finance and tech, leading teams across 4 different continents in about 12 years in my career so far. And I've also been the person that people come to. Still remember being at work late night, doing numbers around 7 o'clock, trying to get through this budget. And I'm sat across the room from the desk from our CEO, and we're having a conversation. We're not talking about numbers. We're talking about life and parenting and marriage and all these different elements. And I'm asking him questions. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I never thought about it." And the next day, he found me and he's like, "I went home and had a conversation with my wife about what we talked about and here the change they're going to make." And he was so excited. And I remember a couple of weeks later, so many people kept on referring to like, what's going on with him? He's changed. He seems a lot happier, a lot brighter. And there's things like that that I've always done throughout my career. I just didn't have the name for it, i.e. coaching. So when about 10, 11 years ago, I made a decision to leave corporate. The reason why I decided to leave was I was just sick and tired of seeing a lot of micromanagement, a lot of poor leadership that I experienced, a lot of people in the environments I was in also experienced. I was sick and tired of being the one and only. And I was like, I want to change this environment. I don't want my kids to grow up and come into their own corporate careers potentially and deal with some of the things that I had seen. I didn't want the people around me to keep on suffering the way they were. And I really wanted to change leadership because for me, it starts at the top. And I started looking into what it looked like. It's like, oh, there's this thing called coaching, by the way. It's something that I've also been doing since I was probably 14 or 15. It's been part of my identity. I just didn't know and have a name for it. So when I decided to leave and set up my own shop, my first company that I used to run, it was a mix of still doing like corporate strategy, turnaround projects with a mix of coaching. And then when I also went ahead and did all my coaching certification, all that kind of stuff as well, I was just like, oh, I'm home. Like all these things that they're teaching, I know this, I do this on a regular basis and just kind of reemphasize what I did. So that first company was the first stab at it. doing some of what I used to do before, bringing the coaching element into it, doing the turnaround projects. And then when I moved into Mindset Shift 7 years ago, now it fully became purely about coaching and leadership development for organizations.
Mm, okay. Interesting. Like you're talking to that coworker or CEO at the other side of the table, and you guys are like doing the budget. And now the next step, we're talking about life and how that transition and how you eventually help that person, and that was like somewhat of an aha moment for you. Of course, added up to the environment and all that you brought up to me. So but I want to understand, right? When did it shift from I'm helping people, this is a calling, to I'm building a real business around this, I'm not sure if it's the first invoice, I'm not sure if the LLC when you filed in or whatever, but I'm just trying to understand when you're like, you know what, this is actually a business.
The shift happened when I started getting paid for it. I think it's a massive difference between being able to do this for other people and not think about it. Do this for other people because it comes naturally. So from my family to friends to the CEO, other people out there in those environments, that was just fine. When I decided to step outside of corporate and create mindset shift in my head, I'm very much like, okay, I need to get paid for doing something that comes naturally to me. Do people actually value me? What do they value me at? How does that actually work, that whole process? And it started off, I remember my first proper coaching role was getting paid something like £45 an hour. I was just like, wow, okay. It was very smooth. It was less than what I was getting paid when I was in corporate. And I remember thinking, what's going to be like? How am I going to really shift this and elevate this? But it also confirmed to me exactly what I thought. There are people who are willing to pay you. You just need to find the right people at the right level and position yourself at the right space. And that's why I spent time doing. And I very much, I moved that £45 up, way up and kept on going with those numbers to the point where I'm like, okay, this is what I know I'm getting value for what I'm given. Because if you're going into an environment and working with, for example, a leader of a Fortune 500 company who's making billions and your work is helping them to make millions and billions, you should get paid for that. But it becomes to how much do you value yourself? How much do you value what you bring to the table? And I think my biggest shift was doing that work to recognize that I do have value, that what I do is important, what I do does make a difference. And I am, I guess, only the title. I am an exec coach. I do run on a leadership transformation organization. This is what I do. So stepping into that identity fully is what really helped me to be like, okay, if I'm stepping into it fully, treating it as a business, I need to get paid. I need to start working that up. And that's what the change happened for me.
Okay, so it's not just about helping people, it's about helping the right people that you can actually, impact more, create that ripple effect you mentioned, right, in the corporate environment and help the leaders do that. Okay. Now that's basically the coaching side, and I want to talk about a part nobody escapes, right? Marketing. And we
Mm.
kind of browse through it like you found your own niche. It's not just executive coaching, it's like specific targeted. So how do those leaders usually find you in the first place?
It's a mixed bag. They find me through LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been an brilliant resource, I would say, most of the time, of just putting out information and thought leadership points. The way that I write, the way that I communicate, I've been told I am direct, challenging, and confronting. And I say the things that people might be thinking but don't necessarily want to say. And therefore, I'm writing in that style because I'm trying to find particular people who are willing to lean into that. But LinkedIn has been really, really good. People found me through that. Referrals have been absolutely amazing as well. So some clients who worked with me in the past have got into the organization and talked about me, and that's led to more opportunities happening. There are friends who are having conversations with people like, "Oh, you're going through that. I know who can help you." And they reach out to me. That's been absolutely brilliant. And the third thing I will actually say is exactly what you're doing right now, Pedro, podcast. I have been surprised at the people who have found my podcast and listened to an episode and reached out to me, or people who have come on my podcast and have ended up becoming clients. There's a handful of people who have actually come on and ended up becoming amazing clients that have worked with for about 4 or 5 years and opened up so many doors and opportunities. So those are probably the three main elements that I have leveraged over the past 7 years to really meet those clients. One I would add to that list I don't do as much, and I'm trying to step back into it with speaking. When I actually first started out in the early days, I started off speaking on stages, and that's how people used to find me. And then when I got super busy and was doing a lot of stuff on the company there to grow, kind of scaled that back because I didn't necessarily have time for it. Don't do that. Recommendations. Anyone listening, keep it going. This is very, very hard not to come off the circuit and go back into it. So if you're on the circuit, the speaking circuit, just keep on doing it. Find the time, make it work because it's a really, really good way for you to get in front of your ideal client profiles.
Mm. Okay, now let's picture this. I'm Pedro, right? And I looked at your LinkedIn, being referred to you, but especially I was invited to a podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, hey, Sope, we record a podcast. You invite me. Eventually, we create synergy, we connection, and you're like, hey, let's, I want to understand how working with you actually looks like, right? And we're having that conversation. I ended up becoming a client. You close me, I'm a client now. So walk me through the experience from my point of view, right? The client on the onboarding session. How does that play out working with you, right? How does your coaching business is structured?
Well, right from the start, actually, you begin to feel it. So I have discovery calls with everyone that I coach because I only coach a select few of people every year. But even in the discovery call, whether we choose to work together or not, naturally speaking, you leave with something that you can walk away and do something with about. So straight away from that conversation, you already start to feel like, oh, that was different and I was challenged and I learned some stuff. Then if we then proceed to actually working together, it's obviously you get a contracts. I'm sent out through to you. Now I'll say something around contracts. In my contract, I have the stipulation that says that if you attend 3 sessions and you haven't done anything that we've talked about in any of the previous sessions, I cancel the contract. And I put that in bold. And I'm very, very intentional around that because again, when the client reads that, it's that reaction, but it's also them knowing that I need you to own this. I will do my part, but for this to actually work, you need to do yours. So you're starting to feel what kind of experience that we're going to have. And then from then onwards, again, so when my team sets everything up, we get the sessions in play and we jump on a call. And typically speaking, my clients, I meet once every 3 weeks, once every 3 to 4 weeks, 6 to 12-month period. And in those conversations that we have, it's you're coming in with something, we talk about it, you leave with some accountability of what you need to kind of do next. And then each session is like you've done ABC. Some of let's call it there's probably 2 levels. The premium clients have access to me outside of our sessions. So they can either email me or in between our 2 sessions, there might be things that come up. They have access to be able to reach out to me as a time that we have available. So there are times where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm about to go behind in front of the board. And I just need to talk about this really, really quickly. That's available to them. Outside of that, everyone has access to an AI that we have developed, which is based on our methodology. So rather than using ChatGPT, you can actually feel like you're having a conversation with someone or a coach from Mindset Shift trained on the way that we kind of do things. So you can utilize that for free and anyone has access to that. And in fact, happy to share that with your audience as well going forward so they can lean into that. And then outside of that, it's the conversations, it's the access that you have. And then depending on what we have decided to do as well, there might be some 360s involved in that whole process, whether it's me tapping into your board, into your C-suite, into your team. There are times when it goes a little bit, and I might to have a conversation with people in your family and get their perspective on what's happening and bring into that as well. That also happens depending on what the work is and what's been happening and why you're actually having a conversation. That's roughly what the whole process looks like when it comes to working with me and working with the organization I'm Mindset.
Okay, interesting. I mean, your work seems pretty hands-on, right, Sope? We're talking about podcasts, we're talking about the coaching practice itself. So how do you think about capacity, which is like a challenge in the coaching space, so you don't stretch yourself too thin, you know?
You can't do everything. You need people, you need an amazing team around you, which I am fortunate to have. I have my EA, who's brilliant. I have my COO, who handles a lot of the operational bits and pieces. I have associates that work with us as well. So they take on some of the work that's coming independent of what it is that we are doing. And one thing that I have learned a very long time ago is create the space for the things that energize you and keep on doing those. Being able to still be involved in coaching, being able to involved in some of the design work for me is very energizing. It reminds me of why we do what we do. So it's also being able to have that space where it's like, actually, am I going out and meeting clients and having conversations? Am I spending some time doing admin? The way my days are structured, I have set days where they're called like either coaching or delivery days. And then I have days where it's just deep work days and there's nothing ever gets blocked into that. So literally every Friday is just my day. And I call that deep work. No one can actually book into that space. And I use that to either write, because I'm currently writing a book right now. I use that to do other bits and pieces that I need space and time to think. I don't want to be interrupted whatsoever. So it's around, I always say that when you are running a coaching business or running any business, actually, you are in charge. So you get to set what your days, your weeks, your months look like. And far too often what I see is a lot of people do not lean into that intentionality of like, this is what I want this week to look like, and I stick to that. It's very, very ad hoc. And when you run in an ad hoc space, you go into that multitasking mode where people say, yeah, I'm great at multitasking. I'm like, yeah, but the science already shows that multitasking doesn't actually happen and it limits your flow state. So rather than going to multitasking, how can you go to deep work? For you to do that, that means you need to prioritize and have some boundaries. So that's something I am very, very intentional about doing around how my weeks look like, which allow me then to be able to do the coaching, run the business, have time for myself and for my family, and not burn out. Because that's how a good business should be run and structured.
Well, interesting take about multitasking. I always felt like I had something that I'm not great at, but when you say like that, deep work, right? It's like if your focus is scattered, you're not going to get the best results. It's not just about being able to do multitasking. It's even maybe that's not something the way to go. So I appreciate that. And on top of it, I want to dive into a little bit and highlight the pricing point about coaching, and you kind of browse through that at the start, right? The 45 pounds an hour, and you're like, yeah, that's not really working. So what I want to understand is the shift, right? Because there are a lot of coaches listening to us and they could be struggling and they could have that scarcity calculator. Like they're looking at their calendar, a lot of the slots are empty, and they're like, hey, I'm going to turn my prices a little bit down or low so I can actually land some clients, that type of mentality. So what was the shift for you that you felt like, you know what, there's nothing wrong specifically about my pricing or my value, and I should be charging more? How that played out for you?
It was steps. The first step for me was exactly that. It's you charge someone something and they're willing to pay for it. The answer is yes. Okay, great. You're in that mix. Second then becomes into positioning. How are you positioning yourself? I would say that there is low range, mid range, and top tier. And I think a lot of people, generally speaking, will oscillate between the low and the mid range kind of level. And for me, when I looked at the data on coaching, I think when I looked at it years ago, I think I was saying that, for example, the average coach, especially outside, was around $60,000 dollars or $100,000 or something along those lines. I was like, oh, if that's what's happening, you can stay in corporate to do that because you don't have the overheads, you don't have the stress, you don't have the business development, all these different elements and stuff that you're dealing with. You can literally just be like, okay, I don't need all that. I can go and stay in corporate and run that. For me, I'm like, there's so much stuff that I am taking on that this needs to be worth my time. How do I, or where do I want to position myself and how do I do it? And I started to look again more and more at people. And it's like, oh, there's some people, for example, like a Marshall Goldsmith, yeah, I know he's top tier, who earns 250K to a mil for an engagement. I'm like, that's interesting. There's Simon Sinek. There's all these different people who are in that same bracket. I'm like, okay, yes, they have the fame and notoriety around them, so that speaks to a particular demographic. But actually, the core and the essence of what they are doing, what they are, how they're showing up, what they're helping those leaders do, it's not different from how I look at the world. So how do I begin to elevate myself? And then the third thing about that, what I realized was if I'm going to speak to a leader, for example, who's earning multiple six figures into the seven figures, and I say that my price is £50 an hour, they're not going to want to work with me because for them, like, it doesn't compute. It doesn't, like, there's no value from it. And I remember there was a good friend of mine who works with some of the top CEOs in the world. She was saying that I think his pay packet was something like stupid, like 40 or 50 mil or something like that. And she remembers he said one of the reasons why he rejected the coach was because that coach was too low. And she's like, what price was he? He was 150. And he was like, that's way too, he doesn't pay for it. The company's paying for it. But in his mind, it was like 0.001%. It's like, what value are you going to give me if I'm earning this and making billions for this organization? So it's like you need to price for the market that you want to operate in. And taking all of that into consideration, my thing was like, okay, I know I will need to keep on increasing. And the only way I can really test it out is by every time I go to a new client, increase the prices. Every time I go to a new client, increase the prices. And that's what I kept on doing until I got to a point where I'm like, actually, I am comfortable with what I'm doing. I'm comfortable with what I'm charging. The clients are less at the level that I want to be operating at. Completely understand that. But then I'm like, actually, my position is I want to work with the top 1% because that for me is where the biggest shift is going to happen. If I can get them to tap into the work that we do and they can make the change and transformation that I need them to make, it will ripple throughout the organization. And that for me is the biggest impact. So it's now aligning both my values and the impact I want to have at a big scale with my financial aspirations and to keep on elevating that and bringing those two together. And that's basically what it's come down to. And like I said, I would not say that it's flowing because there's still a lot of work to be done around the pipeline and the consistency and to move away from the feast and farming kind of approach, which is some of the work that we are doing the repositioning. But I also know that it is very, very possible. There are so many people who be like, actually, I'm rejecting clients because they're coming to me and I don't have the capacity to work with them and they're charging multiple six figures. So why not you? Why not me? What is the difference between both of us? It's just elevation. It's just a belief, which is where it starts and the shift comes from. If you can believe it, now get the data to prove whether you're right or wrong. And that's what I began to do. I believed in myself. Now I got the data to prove whether I'm right or wrong. And so far, it has been good. Has been positive. So I'm still here. I'm still leaning into that.
Yeah, you kind of browse through the imposter syndrome, the big one, right? The one that who am I to charge? Who am I to do to charge X, Y, and Z? Which is sometimes the real problem with coaches on the pricing factor. It's like I'm giving advice to a person and charging that much, but he's so successful and all that. And who am I to do that? I think that's crucial. Great reminder, by the way. Now, that's a solid look into how you approach pricing and structure, and I really love that. Now, I'm curious about where you're taking all this. Sope, looking ahead, where do you see the business going? Are you thinking about scaling, hiring even more people, or is there a next step you're excited about?
No, I am excited about growth and specifically US growth. So the work we do around the intention gap in particular is very suited to all demographics, but it's suited to the US market. We operated there for the last 5 or 6 years. We've had some real success over there. And I think the timing is right to go deeper. Now, being quite transparent, actually, the landscape for us shifted after working there the last 5 or 6 years. Things definitely moved last year, and we had to take a step back and kind of ask ourselves, like, do we still want to be in this market? Do we still want to be operating in this space? And also for me, that came up with was yes, and I spoke to the team about it. And they're like, okay, how do we do it and do it well? So I recognize that leaders are under a lot more pressure than ever, particularly around how they lead through the impact of things like AI, and for them to think differently, how they hold their organization steady through the constant change that we are going through, the territory of the work that we are doing. Again, that's why I said the US is good for that. So I'm super excited about going back into that market, building what feels like ground zero and starting from scratch excites me. Part of that is, I mentioned having my Fridays, is the book. I'm writing a book around that because I want to put the intention gap framework in front of a wider audience. I want to give it a name that leaders can hold on to because the tension is there for most of them. They just haven't got a language from it yet. So between going into the US market, leveraging the book that I'm writing, which hopefully should be done and dusted this year to be released next year, and then doubling down on speaking engagements and podcast appearances and things like that, which all points in the same direction of growth, I'm super excited for that. Because if we can make that a reality, then that means that naturally the team grows, we scale. Already, I'm a dreamer. I'm a feeling of a dreamer. So we identified some key roles that I would definitely want to fill, but we need to grow as an organization into the position where we can actually fill those roles and fill those roles really, really well. So I am super excited for what the future brings even though right now, the way the world is, it's just very chaotic and complex. But that excitement is still there for me.
Do we have a spoiler there? Can I get a name out of the book from you, or we don't have that dialed in already?
My name actually, the name is called The Reckoning.
Mm.
That's the name of the book, and that's all I'm allowed to say for now. But the name of the book is called The Reckoning, and I would say the writing process is not nice. It is very brutal. But I'm pushing through it to get it out there.
Nice. Appreciate that. Now, of course, whenever we're aiming towards the next chapter, always something we're refining, right? In the present. So, what are you currently trying to improve or tighten up in your business so you can have that, penetration in the US market, for example?
You know, the thing I would say is the consistency. I think I touched on it loosely previously.
Mhm.
One thing I see a lot, and you would shed more light on this than I do because we speak to a lot of coaches, is a lot of coach organizations go through this feast of famine space. And I would describe it as a roller coaster. Some days you're up and it looks absolutely amazing. You can look up, you can see the shore and the sea and the world, and it's like, yay. And then you go back down and you're like, oh my gosh, we gotta go again. And that up and down is something that is new to me because prior to that, we were just growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. And then when the changes happened in the US market last year, that knocked me a little bit. It knocked me like not necessarily my confidence, but just made me check and question certain things that we were not doing. And I realized, to the point I made earlier on, some of the things that were foundational for us around business development, which was speaking on stages, which was creating environments where we could meet people, which was meeting clients. I, as the founder of the organization, took my foot off the pedal because we were so busy with the work we were doing. And I thought we'd just keep on going and going and going, never realizing that actually the sales part of the business, you can never stop. You have to keep on developing new clients. You have to keep on getting on stage and speaking. You have to keep on just getting out there. If it is not a case of bringing new clients now and we're just creating a waiting list, that is super important. So I would say that for me, getting back into the smoothness of an operation away from the up and down roller coaster feast of farming is something that we are actively working on to fix and change going forward. So that is no longer part of who we are, how we operate as a business.
I see that a lot, especially in the coaching space, right? We have those great months, and I'm a coach too. And sometimes it's like crickets. So
Mm.
100%. I get that. It's all about the consistency at the end of the day, which reflects in several parts of the business, obviously. Now, if someone listening wants to connect with you or follow your work, Sope, where can people find you and connect with you?
The first place is going to be LinkedIn. In fact, LinkedIn and Instagram, if you type in my name, Sope Agbelusi, you will find everything that you need to know about me, about my organization. Well, if you go to www.mindsetshift.co.uk, that's our website. You can read more about us. And when you go on LinkedIn or on Instagram, there's a newsletter that you can click into as well, which I release every Monday. And that just shares some of the thoughts of things that I'm seeing, what I'm navigating as a founder, what I'm seeing with my clients and some of the work that we're doing. And those would be the best ways to connect with me and who we are and what we do.
You know, there were a few things that we talked today that really stayed with me. I'll put it like that. I would say first, when you were sick and tired of the corporate environment, you didn't just left, and I don't want to hear about that anymore. It is more like I want to change that. It's like I will build a coaching practice towards having a ripple effect, talking about the leader in it, so we can have a better environment. So I think that speaks highly, and because I've been there, I'm going to be honest with you. I worked at banking when I was 21 and we had the subprime crisis, and I just stepped out. I was like, this is not for me. I'm done with this. But maybe I wasn't mature enough. You had a different style, right? You were more down the road, but I was like, this is not working out for me. I'm just going to step out. And I think most people do that instead of trying to change things. I think it's human behavior to a certain point, and I think that speaks highly of your integrity and considering the attempt to change the landscape, if that makes any sense. Now, also one thing that really caught my attention is that you kind of have this way of creating friction. Like, for example, you mentioned positioning. You created friction in the top of the funnel, right? You're like, I talk in a way so people can be attracted to what I say, and if they don't, it's all good. It's just the way I roll and the way I do things. So I think that's very interesting. And the second point of friction, it's like when you told me you cancel contracts if the work is not being done from the client, it's like, and it's in bold characters, right? This is like a statement of, hey, this is how I do things. If this is not going to work out, this is not going to work out for me and you. It's not just that scarcity mindset of, oh my God, I'm going to lose a client. Oh my God, I need more revenue, because at the end of the day, what's going to happen in the future, right? It's going to be a pain in the butt. That client's not going to work well. And you're just trying to protect your time. It's about protecting your time, because if the person doesn't resonate with your message or doesn't put in the work, it's Fridays for deep work are going to be hammered into solving problem with people that actually don't want to do the thing, So, Sope, this is my long-winded way of saying that I appreciate what you do. I appreciate you being here and sharing so openly today, okay? It was great having you on.
Oh, thank you very much, Pedro. I really appreciate it. You have some really good questions. So thank you for having me on your
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.